This oral military history project of the Lowell Area Historical Museum is a series of documentaries of the Lowell area men and women who proudly served and sacrificed part of their lives to preserve the opportunities for all of us to build our businesses and raise our families under a blanket of freedom.
I am Corinne Bieber. I'll be doing the interview, and the camera person today is Aaron Souls. Okay. Up until the time you enlisted in the Army, what was your childhood like?
Before I went in the Army?
Correct.
Pretty raggedy, really. When in younger times, it wasn't too bad, you know. But we moved around quite a bit in the olden days. I was born in North Door, if that's what you want to know. And at that time, it was a little bit larger than it is now, but it's a lot of rich people live out there now. It's in, and then anyway, from North Door, we moved into Grand Rapids, and we moved around a little bit there. We lived on Godfrey for a while, on a high hill, and it was not a very good place. Then we moved to a place called Withy Street, and that was between Buchanan and Division Street in Burton Heights. That wasn't too bad, and I had a lot of memories from there. One of the worst was, well, there was two incidents that I recall greatly, most always. One was when we were playing in my father's car, and I broke the key off in the switch. And I knew that that was a bad mistake, so I ran away down the street, and I went in between a couple of houses, and I began to cry. And there was some fellow there came over and asked what was wrong, and you know, a man, and I told him what I did. So he took me back home, and my father was a little upset, but he didn't, you know, didn't punish me or anything. And at that same location, at that time, we had cap guns, and they had the roll of caps, and my sister had a roll of caps in her pocket, but by her moving around, she rubbed them somehow, and they all went off in her pocket. So she burnt, you know, some of her, not bad, but she did get burnt from those going off, and she was like I was, you know, a little hesitant to go home, you know. Not because she got burnt, but because she burnt the dress up, you know, burnt a big hole in it. At the same location, for amusement sometimes, we had barrels. We'd get inside of a barrel, you know, we're talking about a 32-gallon barrel, and then we'd push whoever was in it around the yard. We'd take turns, and it was kind of tough in there because it was metal. You know, you were banging from one side to the next, but that was what we did there. One day there, I dropped a jar of peanut butter. That's before they had plastics, and I broke it, so I was taking groceries from the car to the kitchen. So I thought my father would get real angry. So what I did was I threw the broken peanut butter jar and all up under the steps, so he couldn't see them. And, you know, they were talking about, well, they're missing something. But that was as far as it went. But about 3 years later, my father went to repair the steps, and there was a jar of peanut butter. So he remembered.
Yeah.
So that came to light. And then we moved to a street called Dickinson. And
Go ahead. Go ahead.
all right, we moved to a street called Dickinson. And at that time, that was the first year we went to school. And because my brother and I were the first to go to school, I hadn't went to kindergarten or preschool or anything. So I had to go with my brother. But then they took a test, and they said, well, you don't have to, you know, could advance another year, you know. So I did that. And I ended up advancing 2 years. But that's when I went to the first Catholic school. The Catholic schools didn't have kindergarten at that time. They only had the first year. So for kindergarten, we had to go to public schools.
Mm-hmm.
So...
What were your teenage years like?
Kind of raggedy because we smoked at a young age. I was about 10 to 11 when I first started smoking. We had a lot of fights at school. We were into a lot of mischief. We stole a lot of things, you know, little stuff. Sometimes we'd go around, we'd use black, heavy thread, and when like people were at church or something in the evening, we'd tie the thread around their hood ornament and then tie it to the car that was in front. So when the people came out of church and they would back up, they'd watch their hood ornament snap off. Or when the car in front would take off, that would pull it off too. We took bicycle inner tubes, tied them on the exhaust mufflers, you know, the exhaust pipes, because when they'd start the car up, the thing would flap. And also, it sounded like a horse passing gas, you know what I'm saying? So, we did a lot of that stuff, and it was really mischief. It really was bad stuff. I remember one time, it was around Halloween time, we took an old tire and we put some gas in it and started it on fire and then rolled it down a hill in the street. And that caused a whole lot of problems. Cars were breaking and skidding and stuff. We didn't really think about, you know, the serious side of it, you know, okay? So we did a lot of dirty little stuff. In the wintertime, we'd wiggle the street signs loose and pull them out, then lay them in the street, and then cover them up with snow, because then when a car would hit it, they'd make an awful, awful noise. And you know, bang, bang, and one of the other things we did, which was dangerous as all hell, and that was we used to grab a hold of the bumpers on the cars and kneel down and slide on our feet. You know, we go for a couple of blocks. But see, the danger part was some of the manhole covers didn't freeze over. So if the car went over one and you hit one, you kind of get flung around pretty bad sometimes. It wasn't like you had to go to the hospital, but you wasn't grabbing any bumpers for a while. Because in those days, all the cars had bumpers. They were metal, and they were separated from the car body. So it wasn't, you know, some of the times there would be, people would be, you know, a guy and a girl would be making out in a car, and we slowly crawl up there and then jump on the bumper and jump up and down, you know. They'd come out running after us, but we'd run off down the street. That kind of stuff.
So you said you volunteered for the draft. What made you decide to volunteer?
Because I knew I was going to get drafted soon anyway. And I figured, well, the job, I didn't care for the job I had. It was pretty risky because they ran out of work on production lines, so they had us guys, a bunch of us cleaning ceilings and stuff in a factory. And we had to walk on these little narrow gangplanks. And sometimes we'd looking down below where they did have machinery, and you're talking about a 40-foot drop before you hit some of it, and some of it had metal points or something aiming upward. So I volunteered for the draft and thought, well, I just go ahead and get it over with. Because by that time already, I had already run away from home quite a few times and ended up going back, but at that point I no longer went home.
Why did you decide to join the Army as opposed to like the Navy or Air Force or anything?
In the Army?
Yeah.
because the Army was the easiest one at that time to get into. Their physicals were lenient, you know, they were sloppy, whereas the, like Marines is still, and the Navy that was at that time, and the Air Force, of course, was the same. You had to meet a certain physical requirement, height, weight, you know, for your height. So you had to be pretty well balanced out.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, you know, not the easiest one to get into.
What were your first few days in the Army like?
First few days,
Correct.
bummer. At that time we went to Detroit for physicals, and just before I went for the day to be drafted, I had done a stupid thing, and I was sitting on a car fender from some friends while we were driving down the street, and the driver had to hit the brakes, so I slid off and fell right in front of the front wheel. Now the front wheel didn't go over me, but the front wheel stopped right between my legs, and if it went another inch, I'd have probably been a female. Okay? But so when I went in, I was off limping. My father came and got me because he knew I had, he took care of us every once in a while, he'd check on us. He came and got me, took me to the hospital, and they said that I had a bruised hip, you know, and ligaments were kind of ripped a little bit, but they said it would be all right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, nothing permanent. But when I went in, and even while I was in basic, I did some limping for a while.
In your
But yeah, just like when we took physicals, you know, they asked everybody to urinate, you know, so this one guy couldn't urinate, so everybody chipped in a little. You know. So at that time, to give you an example, we had a guy there from Bostonia that was, he didn't want to be drafted, but he didn't care, but finally they decided they couldn't take him because he couldn't speak English very well. Very hard to understand him.
Mm-hmm.
But he was a likable fellow.
In your basic training and boot camp, what was that like?
Oh, that was miserable. We had a lot of times, I took it in Arkansas, and at that time it was a camp, which meant it was only temporary training area. It's now a fort because it's been designated as a permanent fort. But anyway, at that time it was awfully hot there. And of course, being you know, indoctrinated into something with so much discipline was a bummer to begin with. But it was exhausting, you know, and awfully hot. If you sat in the training areas and your clothes were kind of out away from your arm, they got so hot that when you moved, it would actually burn you, you know, your clothing. Mm-hmm. There was no such thing as anything cold to eat. You know, they bring you Jell-O, you know, but it was like warm Kool-Aid.
Yeah. What were your instructors like?
They were, they had to be mean and ornery, and that's just exactly what they were. They didn't express any sympathy whatsoever for anyone. We had a fellow there that was told him he could not be drafted because he had metal pins in his legs, but they wouldn't listen. So when we marched a lot of times on these long 20-mile hikes, this kid would start limping. So the other drill instructors, which is a DI for short, they would go around and put helmets on his head just to make it more miserable. So it wasn't good.
Mm-hmm. Okay, you said you were in the Korean and Vietnam War. Where exactly did you go in Vietnam?
Where did I go? Well, actually, the central area, we called it a cantonment area, where it meant that you had a reasonable security or fence area, But from there we went to many areas because we were with, I was at that time with combat engineers. So what our task was to go to certain areas and to build a flat area large enough for helicopters to land and take off. And they were known as LZs, or landing zones. So while we were there, we had infantry was always with us because they supplied our security, but we still got attacked numerous times. Can I say here that at this time we learned to appreciate people that were with artillery, which means heavy guns, because we would be attacked and we had not enough. We didn't have any heavy armament, okay? We had mortars, but that was about it. So we would call, or they would call our, our company, unit, and they would get a hold of a artillery unit and tell them that we needed security, assistance. So they would ask roughly where we were. We couldn't see them. They were 20 miles away. So they would ask roughly where we were, and we'd send in, from the map, the coordinates and so forth. And then they would say, okay, we'll fire a round for visual sighting, okay? What they would do is they would fire a shell that would flare before it hit the ground, okay? Then at that point, they would fire one and we could look and see, well, hey, that thing is about 500 yards too much to the right. So we would say, okay, it was 500 yards too far to the right. We need you to move in about 400 yards and 100 yards ahead of us. So then they'd fire another one for effect. And that would hit the ground and blow off. And we say, you're on it, you're on target. And those guys would fire shells all around us. Not hit us, but all around our perimeter. I mean, if they had just one sloppy round, it would have hit us, So those guys were lifesavers a lot of times. But see, we were on one LZ. Now, we used to get friendly with the village people. Not that we could speak with them, but, you go during the day, we'd march through the village, while they were building a rough road to bring supplies in for the helicopters to come and get and take further into a combat zone. So during the day, you'd go down and you may give the little kids in the village some chocolate or stuff, but not too much chocolate, because chocolate caused those people to become diarrhea, But we would do that, and sometimes our company medic would go and look at some of their sick or wounded or whatever. But then at night, we'd always be attacked. And a lot of times it was coming from the same place where we were during the day. Okay, so just one incident I'll go into if you got time.
Yeah.
Okay? We were down in the village and security was going through, looking around, and didn't see nothing. But this one fella happened to look down and it looked like something was dragged. So he kept looking around. And Mama San was over here, Mama San's old lady, and she was cooking their one pot food, whatever, everybody throws something in it. But she was cooking it. But, just her standing there, and maybe a couple of kids snooping around. Anyway, he kept looking and he wondered. So he kind of kicked the dirt and he followed it right to the fire where she was cooking. So he looked at Mama San and he looked at the kids, and they got kind of shaky looking. So finally Mama San backed off. So he called some guys over, and so they looked around and there was a great big metal top off of a barrel. So they slid it back, and there was a great big hole where actually tunnel rats go in it. But the VC could build a whole community underground. See, and they had to have some place to come out. They were coming out at night and firing, you know, their mortars, their grenade launchers, and their other little weapons, and then go back and be covered up. So then they started looking all through the village. They found a lot of them, little tunnels, you know. But they had, there'd be like a bush like we got right out here in front, okay? Be a big bush, but they'd have bamboo pipe. What was like pipe, big bamboo that are hollow. They'd pound them in the ground, and that's how they'd get their air. Okay? But they had rooms down there. They could eat. They even had medical treatment areas in those tunnels. So you see, and it would be the same. We didn't have electricity or lighting, so a lot of the guys would buy candles from the villagers. But the first thing you had to do when you bought a candle was try to look through it through a bright light, like a truck light, or the sun, because they would put blasting caps inside, which are little caps that set off high explosives. So if you were like in your dugout and you wanted to write a letter and you lit this candle and you'd be close to it writing and it would go off, and it wouldn't kill you, but it would badly injure you, blind you or something like that, see.
And what types of things would go through your mind during combat?
What kind of thoughts?
Yeah.
In my case, it was thoughts about Daddy and Dink and Mama. Dink, Dennis, okay, Dennis and Perry and Mama. I thought, well, darn, you know, maybe I'll get back to see him and maybe I won't. You know, and you worry about it. You definitely think a lot about going to hell because you definitely know you haven't been to church. You know. So, you know, you try to survive. You do everybody does their little bit, you know. You don't, when you're in combat, they don't, see, that's the difference between being in the Army and being in the Navy or the Air Force, because those people like in the Navy, they're on a ship. They get close to each other, real close, because they live with each other all the time. And the Air Force is somewhat the same way. It's the same people. And if the unit goes, they all go. But in the Army, if you get too friendly and you're in a combat situation and your buddy gets killed, it really, really, really hurts. You know, really hurts. I had quite a few. And at the same time, you know, here would come a fresh recruit or, you know, a new soldier come into the unit. He'd be there and you'd say, okay, you're assigned to this squad, this platoon. And he would go there and they'd say, okay, you'll have to bunker in with this fella. And the next day, he'd be blown all to hell. You know. One guy in particular, but he wasn't there even 24 hours. And when he got through, they picked up about 75 pounds of him and shipped him back.
What types of things happened during combat?
What type of what?
What types of things, like what stresses went on during prolonged combat?
I'm not quite getting all that.
During combat, what types of things did you do?
What kind of things during combat?
Right.
Oh, first off, you make sure that you're well protected as much as possible. Trying to visualize where the enemy might be, because usually you got hit in the late evenings or very early in the mornings. Now, we had some machine guns had tracer rounds, which were called WP or Willie Peter. standing for white phosphorus, because when they fired that, it would glow. So you could see actually where you were shooting because you couldn't sight. But you'd look for a rifle fire flare, you know, or something like that on that order. Now the enemy were good in what we used to call bandoliers. That means they'd sneak slow on the ground. They might start that night to crawl towards you and wouldn't get to where they had to be, like say early in the morning. These bandoliers were long poles that they would slide way ahead of them. And they could slide these up underneath your concertina or barbed wire fence, okay? So what would happen was, if this blew off, it would make an opening so they could run in. We had defensive mechanism, you know, armor that would take care of a lot of it. Most of them were called Beehive Rounds, which were explosives and kind of like a long plastic thing, and they had like ball bearings inside. And when you detonate these, all these bearings and stuff would fly out like a shotgun, you know. So in case they start running, a lot of them would fall immediately dead, you know.
What would happen when you were surprise attacked?
What would happen when we were surprised, attacked?
Yeah.
You were on your toes. You didn't relax that much. Only in the cantonment area. As I said before, July, whenever we got through with some assignment, then we would move back to July, which was in an area where we built kind of like permanent tents and stuff, okay? We had medical facilities, you know, you could go on sick call. You had outhouses. You had a place to shower. You had places to eat and so forth, you know, and bunkers. Sandbag, well sandbagged.
Mm-hmm.
So, but on, when you were out in the other areas, you didn't really, you had to be, you know, yeah, you had to be ready to just jump up and zip. I mean, right there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you fell asleep, somebody else didn't. A lot of times the rats and the snakes and the mongooses would keep us awake, you know. So, because rats would come into your, you know, we had dug a great big holes, and then we laid this, what they call PCP over top, and a lot of sandbags. That's so if a rocket fell down, it wouldn't come in. And it'd be about 10 guys in this hole, okay? So the rats would come in, and the snakes would get hungry and come eat the rats. And the only thing to get rid of the snakes was the mongoose. So they'd come in and get, it was kind of a cycle.
Right.
I was writing a letter home one time, and a rat ran across the floor and hit my shoe and flipped up like this right in front of my eyes. I was all darn disgusted. You couldn't see over there, you wrote letters, you didn't have to have mail. And you just wrote little letters, you put the outside address on it, and that was about it. We had what they called voicemail, little tapes, and little packets to put them in that were mailed postage free, but that was the limit. That little, you could have more tapes, but I mean the weight. And a lot of guys had little tape recorders, and they would send home tape letters. I sent quite a few of them home.
Can you explain the story where you were going to be taking a bath and you guys got shot at?
You really want to hear that?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, when some of those guys got really dirty, I mean really filthy, you know, and it was, so we'd get some water. Of course, the water already looked like watered out lemonade, or like an elephant urinated in a, you know, in the bucket. But we got water. It was classified as potable, okay, and drinkable. And okay. Well, anyway, we get the water. we'd put it in these garbage cans early in the morning, and then wait till the evening, and because the sun had warmed it up, so we'd go out and we'd climb in these garbage cans with a little soap and just lather all up, you know, and a lot of free soap. So anyway, one time I was out there, and we got hit pretty early in the evening, which was unusual, but anyway, so we were getting mortar rounds. So I had to jump out of that sucker. I had no clothes on, no weapons nearby, no nothing. But anyway, I jumped out and I'm running, and everybody's laughing because the bubbles are flying off of me, and I'm stark naked, running over gravel, dirt, rocks, you know, running like holy get out. And everybody's just laughing, even though we're getting more than these guys. Oh, look at Bieber running. Oh, ain't he fast, you know. Yeah, you know, that's what it was. There's times, I have to add, that in combat there's always some times that are amusing. And you really live for these times when everybody can get a big laugh. You need a laugh. So when something comical occurs, I mean, these people just, the guys just laugh, you know. So, yeah, you laugh a lot.
Were there many casualties in your unit? Were there many casualties in your unit?
Were there many what in the unit?
Casualties.
Yes. We got hit one night. It's too bad. Somewhere's in all my papers, which are highly mixed up, I got a list of about 24 casualties. Now you're talking about out of a company of about 120 to begin with. One of the casualties was a medic from Detroit. He was a black dude, no problem with that. He was a good medic, but he would, a lot of times, you know, he'd run out to a guy that was out in the open or something, and a lot of times you couldn't sew a guy up or something, but you put a tourniquet on or put gauze around the bone that was protruding or something, you know, and that'd work. But anyway, he got shot, and he knew he was dying. So he told those guys, look, he said, carry me over to the stream. That was the stream where we pumped out the water. Carry me over there and lay me in the stream, would you? They carried him over there, they laid him in the stream, and he asked one of the dudes if he had any grass, weed, marijuana. And dude said, yeah. I said, well, give me a couple, you know. So the guy was smoking, and there you didn't, you burned him, you know, you drew on him. Anyway, but so he was smoking them, and nobody cared, you know. What's a poor guy, he's in misery. So he smoked him, and he did die. I had a driver assigned to me. The driver got shot across his nose. The bullet just seared across his, but seared his eyes. All right, so he really couldn't see, but otherwise he was all right. But he had no vision. So the guys told him, hey, don't move, stay where you're at. We'll try to come back and get you. But they were still defending themselves, okay? But just so happens one of the VCs got up there, and them is some nasty. They know just what to do. They held the rifle up, but they shot him in the lower spine. What this does is you don't die immediately, but your spine and your central nervous, so you have no movement in the lower extremities. So they knew he wasn't going anywhere. But, believe it or not, we could all hear him scream. You know, and so later on, of course, I had the idea when he was in the body bag, but, you know, now, I don't know for you guys benefits or whatever, I got to tell you, I don't usually talk about anything about combat. I'm one of those that rarely did. I came back from out of the Army, and I just let it go. I'm not one of these guys that goes to the monuments and looks for the names and cries and wears all these different pins and stuff. I had in my mind that I'm in the Army, it's a job, I'll do my job for the 20 years, I'll get out, I'm gonna go home just like I came in. I walked in, I'm gonna walk out. Although I could have received a Purple Heart, I turned it down because Purple Hearts at that time meant to me a fellow really got wounded. You know, we had guys that were losing their arms and their legs, you know. Why want a Purple Heart when this guy lost all of that? We had one guy who got shot right through the jaw. He had no lower jaw. He couldn't talk anymore. He salivated continuously. And the only reason we know this because we went back to cantonment area where there was a hospital where they would give life-saving treatment and could operate roughly on wounded individuals till they medevaced them out to the United States or Hawaii or Japan where they had a hospital that they could treat the individual so that he wouldn't die eventually from it. We had a lot of, like I said, we lost 24 that night. Some of them recovered, the bodies were recovered, some were not. So we didn't, you know. We had guys that were now for street security or road security or stuff, we had what we call a backup driver. And that was when they'd load a truck full of sand, the heavy gravel and all that stuff, and he would back up down the road to make sure he'd back up, because if he went frontwards and the front wheels hit a mine, they would blow up and kill the driver. So they always backed up, so if it hit a mine, it would blow the back of the truck up, but the driver could survive. Okay, but anyway, we had a truck that hit a mine, and it hit it going frontward, and the guy that was driving was blown up so hard against the headache board. A headache board is on a gravel truck is because the Army trucks have no tops on them. So the headache board was on the back part that comes out over the truck that goes up with the truck when they empty, okay? So he was blown up so hard against it, and he lost his 2 legs and both of his arms. He was still alive when they took him out. What happened after that, I don't know. I can't tell you. I'll give you one more story about the injured, okay? Now, I don't want to go to more. I had picked up a disease or a germ. They call it amoeba. What it was eating everything that I was eating. So I lost a lot of weight. So they told me, okay, you got to go over. Again, we was in July. You got to go over to the Air Force Hospital. They'll look at you there. So I was over there. While I was over there, after a combat or where troops were confronted, they always had a lot of helicopters flying in with the wounded. So anyway, while I was there, they had some coming in. Some weren't too bad. But I realized that, you know, that, hey, I can't see the doctor because the combat injuries are coming in. But they brought a guy in on a dirty stretcher. And he asked if I could give him a cigarette, and I said, yeah, certainly. So I lit up the cigarette. So when I went to give it to him, I could see that he had no fingers. They was just nubs. They were all burnt, okay? So I put the cigarette in his mouth, and he was smoking it, and he was talking, and he was thanking me, but it was heartbreaking, terribly heartbreaking. And then, when they came with the hospital stretcher, and they lifted this guy up, and put him in the hospital stretcher, part of his cheek stuck to the stretcher he was on. So when they lifted him up, it kind of exposed his teeth and stuff. And I mean, just what can you say? You just want to run and scream. You want to cry. In fact, I think about it now, I'm almost ready to cry. Anyway, these, give me a few minutes, please.
Mm-hmm.
Be dramatic.
That's fine.
That's what I'm trying to do. I knew another fella he was in a sandy beach, but a mortar went off behind him, and he actually got sandblasted. So he was okay. You couldn't see anything wrong with him. But he took his shirt off, his whole back side of him. You could see all kinds of little grains of dirt and stuff embedded in his skin. So he had to come in periodically, and they would scrub him with stiff gauze and pull this stuff out of him, the sand and stuff. But otherwise, he was okay.
What was the food like?
The food was junk. We sometimes we traded something for fruit from the Vietnamese, but you couldn't always trust that either. Mm-hmm. We didn't have any fresh fruits. If you had any bread or anything at all, it had wheat mites in it. But you ate it. They said, hey, eat it, it's food, You had a lot of sea rations, a lot of canned foods, and they weren't too good, But, hey, we went 3 days without anything one time. Nothing but water. So when we got these rations in, we were eating, like the bread is 3 years old in a can and comes out round. And we were eating the damn stuff, crackers and stuff. And we didn't have any cigarettes anymore at that time. They had these little packages of 4 or 5 cigarettes in a pack, little bitty ones. And they were so damn old, they were yellow. And we were smoking that stuff. I tell you what, it wasn't much worse than smoking the grass. I didn't smoke the grass once. And I didn't like it. I got a sore throat.
Can you explain the significance of the towel?
Oh, this is what I got in July. We were there sleeping on cots, but it was awful hot. But at the night you're just laying on a nasty old canvas cot. So I was able to get a couple of beach towels. Ain't that odd? In a place like that in July, you'd find big beach towels. But I got these beach towels, and this is the only one that survived from all that time that I kept. But anyway, we'd lay on one and kind of cover up with the other one. They were light enough, because at night sometimes it was cool, especially during the monsoon, it was terrible. So, but this is the only thing I got left, and I'm trying to think, it's 40 some years old, I'm pretty sure. Pretty close to it if it isn't.
Right.
It's maybe 47 years old. But I dragged it around, what for, I don't know, and I still don't know. In fact, after, it's there. I don't know, wore out.
Yeah.
But we went through quite a bit. I had to unask this sucker quite a lot. Dirty word.
That's okay.
Unasked meant you jumped up and zip, gone. You had to run, because if you were in like tents, but you had sandbags all around you, but there was nothing actually above you except the canvas. So you were all right if the mortar landed outside, but if one hit the tent, it'd come right in, see? So we had to run out, and what we had was these sandbagged up, and they were actually a half of a large sewer drain. Now that's kind of hard to explain, but these were metal pipe that you actually bolted. They still use them in, they use them in states. When you go under bridges and so forth, they cement them together, and it becomes a great, you can walk through it, you know what I'm saying? But we had a half of one, laying down, and then covered it with sandbags on top, and we'd run in there and skim, in there. And in front, you'd have sandbags, it was kind of zigzag, so that the shrapnel wouldn't come in, So, it was cool,
Right.
Well, we'd run there.
Did you or any of the other soldiers do things for like good luck or have any rituals that you did?
Did any either of the other soldiers
Have anything that you would do for good luck?
A lot of them would say, there was some, they'd wear a chain or something, say this is good luck, I'm not sure what I had. Off and on we had different items, but I tell you what, good luck is something after it occurred, really. In other words, if a bomb of a mortar goes off near you, but you hear it, and you can run away from it, that's good luck. But if the sucker lands and you don't hear it and you don't run away from it, that's bad luck, because you're dead then. If you don't hear it, you're done for.
What'd you guys do for entertainment?
Breathe. No. We had, every so often, the Army would get entertainment groups from locals now. Mm-hmm. And they would come in, now this is in July, not out on an LZ. Mm-hmm. Because then nothing come out there. So in July, but they would come in, and you had a little rooms where you could go to drink your little 10-cent beer, And they'd maybe have 2 or 3 guys playing some musical instruments, and these girls would come out dancing with their little frilly stuff, But it wasn't a strip tease, but it might just as well have been, because when they got through, the girls were walking around with 3 postage stamps, That's about what they wore. But anyway, that's what we had for entertainment. We didn't have any movies. Some guys had a lot of porno that they had sent in from some of their, they might have known a friend from Da Nang or somebody. They'd say buy some of the porno and send it in. But they didn't have a movie theater for it. You just had kind of like a little projector, and you'd go in one of the little huts and, somebody would watch it. I don't know, I didn't watch that. Why watch that stuff when there's nothing you can do, Not unless you want to become freaky, Some of the guys would be in the shower and say, hey, my hand, my soap, and I'll wash it as fast as I want, So,
So what did you do on leave?
Leave?
Mm-hmm.
What leave?
Oh.
You mean over there?
Yeah.
No, you didn't get... Some guys would go on what they called R&R, rest and relaxation. But sometimes you'd line up and you had to wait for a flight. Now you're off on, they'd already signed you out. And you'd be sitting there for 3 days waiting for a plane to get out. You'd maybe go to Japan. You'd be there a day and had to try to get back already. And I said, hell with it. I just, like I said, there wasn't much there. And a lot of guys didn't even go anywhere, Just stayed right there. Because see, the saying goes, your first 3 months there and your last 3 months were the worst. Your first 3 months where you're scared that you wasn't going to make it. The last 3 months, you were afraid you weren't going to get out. Mm-hmm. And the middle 6 months, you didn't care.
Yeah.
You were just every day,
Can you explain the story with the guy that was getting ready to leave, but he ended up dying?
The guy who,
He told you that he didn't think he was gonna go home?
oh, and he hit that one that had the child?
Yeah.
Okay, that was Rex Hoover. That was his name. I used to talk with him quite a bit when I was maintaining a generator, for electrical that we needed. He was a lieutenant's driver, who was a platoon leader, and him and I got kind of close because his wife had wrote that because he had left home when his wife was pregnant, and I had to leave Dink and Perry behind, and so I kind of knew how it felt. So we talked sometimes, especially when he got the letter. That is, he had a son, but he once told me that he felt he would never get home. He wasn't going to make it. He wouldn't see his son. And I always try to encourage him, say, well, just keep your head down, do your thing, but don't get, heroic or anything like that. So, but anyway, he was out on the road, and this is what bugs me because we all knew that you didn't be on the road at 5 in the evening anymore because you wasn't getting close to the sun going down.
Can you hold on a second?
We're advised not to be on the road after 5 in the evenings, but the CO had just about 15 minutes more to finish up a project, so he told them to stay out. So anyway, they were getting gunfire, so the lieutenant, of course, jumped in the Jeep and told the driver to take off, and just at that time, VC jumped up and shot straight through the window and hit the driver right dead in the chest. And I guess he didn't even live long enough to say, a Hail Mary or nothing. He just died. But it was a shame because he had premonitions, and that's a hard way to go. Because you have to think that you're always going to stay alive, going to make it. Even though you don't, but you have to feel that way. So.
Can you describe your experiences in the Korean War?
I wasn't there during the Korean War. I was over there during the occupation. Korea, we had to do, because we was on on the Liberty Line. Well, we were just a little bit short distance from Liberty Bridge. I don't know if you heard about that or not, but that was a bridge where they exchanged a lot of prisoners. So what it was is units there would have to go up every so often and pull security, which meant they had to watch the border line there almost all the time. A lot of times we got over there, the Koreans would steal, anything to get a hold of it. Their buses were made out of parts of blown up old army trucks that they would put together. Now the Koreans were slick, because you'd walk by a Korean's yard and look in there and there'd be a tire. And a couple of days later you go by, it'd be a hubcap. A couple of days later you'd find a fan for that went on a motor. Anyway, after about a month, you look there and it'd be a whole Jeep sitting there. Not an army Jeep though, painted gaudy blue and pink and orange and yellow and black, and they'd make a taxi cab out of it. But anyway, they still had a lot of problems with the Koreans, because the Koreans, first off, the Koreans buried their dead sitting up. And the higher or the wealthier you were, the higher up on the hill that you owned, you were buried. But I didn't know this, and we were out on bivouac one time, and I'm sitting there eating like a good fellow. I don't know, a can of beans, can of crackers or whatever. And some guy says, You're like sitting on them dead people eating. Hey, what are you talking about? Somebody was just buried here not too long ago. The dirt's still fresh. Man, I jumped up and then they explained to me how it was, you know. So, yeah, we used to go, now we could buy a lot of hard liquors and stuff. We could get a hold of it there. So, but it was mostly still taking security, you know. I was with an infantry division there that was strictly fighting soldiers. Now we had, they called them Katusas, which was Korean Army soldiers that were attached to the American Army for training purposes. But, now they didn't speak our language, and they had their own sergeants and so forth. But they were mean. Oh, they were mean. Their sergeants would come out, and if one of the soldiers did something wrong, they'd beat them with a 2x4. So a lot of times we didn't like that. So we'd go out there and tell them to get one of the other guys to decipher something. We'd tell them, hey, you tell that sergeant there, if he does it again, he's going to be dead meat, you know. So we did it quite a bit. But anyway, that's beside the point. No, we used to, I got to tell you this, we had these Quonset huts. Okay, those are just a half a circle again, but very large. And they had a door on one end and a door on the other. You didn't have any, to go to John, you had to walk about 50 feet sometimes further, 150. But the guys would get so drunk, then they have to go out, and they ain't going to walk. So they go over to the side of this where we were sleeping in, metal, and urinate. Then they maybe just pass out and slide right down in the damn stuff. Some guys didn't even make it out of bed. I'm sorry. They were terrible. Some guys would just lay over and urinate and, you know, go out on the floor until the stream got weak, and then it would just come right up in the bed with them, you know. That was terrible. And the Koreans, the Katusa soldiers, they didn't sit on toilet seats like we do. They always squatted for anything they did. So they would go into our toilets and they'd squat on the dang seats. Oh, we used to hate that. Damn. But anyway, they had showers there, but they had a great big, you know, big mirror on the shower. So if anybody walked in, they could see if anybody was doing any hanky-panky in the shower room. You know, perverted sex stuff, you know. I remember, I joke about it, but, you know, I went there one time, and I'm washing, and I'm bending over, and I'm saying, hey, man, look at the ass of that boy. And all of a sudden I said, whoa, that's us we're looking at, you know. So it was comical, but no, I never did anything there wrong either. I and my buddy, Mefford, Omi met him in California. Mefford, he and I went to town and we got really drunk. And so over there you have to take your shoes off, you know, in Korea, before you go in the houses. So we took our shoes off. Now this guy's got a foot about half my size. So anyway, we got so drunk, but then all of a sudden a siren goes on. Everybody come back to the, you know, the base. So I run out there and I put shoes on and I run back to base and I get back and I'm bleeding. My feet are just bleeding all over. And the reason was I was wearing his shoes. He had mine. And I was just, oh, I'm telling you, my feet were just tore up, nails all over, tore up, oh, geez. But a lot of the older soldiers would remember the old phrase, you know, warm floors, sliding doors, and slant-eyed, can I say it?
Yeah.
All right, slant-eyed whores. All right, that was the saying. Warm floors because the heat went under the floor. The heat didn't come in a room. They'd build a little fire outside and the heat would go like through a chimney under the floor and then up and out the other side, so it'd warm the floor. So it was like, in sliding doors, everybody had a, but what they did was they used the water off of rice and mopped it over newspapers and stuff on the floor and let it dry, and you'd swear it was nice shiny linoleum, but it wasn't. We had still a lot of landmines that you had to watch out for in Korea. But here's the thing that was bad. We were moving a 280 millimeter. We didn't have it, but they did, but the infantry was along with it. Anyway, they were moving this, it was an atomic cannon, and this is a humongous. It takes a truck in front and a truck in back to move it. All right, but the Koreans believed that if they could run or go anywhere where it was danger and escape, that the bad spirits would be killed. So this kid ran out there, and this big old sucker caught his leg. And it didn't hit his foot, but the pressure was so great that the blood that was in the leg was squeezed down that his foot just blew blood out. Just boom. So they, over there, the first one to touch an injured person has to be responsible. So nobody would touch him. They didn't want nothing to deal with him. So the Americans, we had an ambulance right there quick. They grabbed him and they took him. Now he lost his leg. And he also lost where he was living. Nobody wanted him no more. Mm. But that's, there was a lot of stuff that went on, a lot of dumb stuff. So, like I said, it was still landmines. You had to be careful. I and Little Mefford, we bought some booze, and we had a couple other guys, and we had a bunch of women, and we went way up in the hills to a spring, and we put our beer in a little spring and stuff, and we was drinking beer and stuff like that. But I don't know. I wouldn't, because over there, women can be diseased and not know it, because they don't do anything, And there's no, you don't get a condom over there. You get these damn old, at that time you had to squeeze them in your own penis, you know what I'm saying? And rub it on yourself. It was just a cream. But we used to call them Pro Kits, okay? Anyway, you could have got condoms, I guess, if you went through a little trouble. We didn't have them in our immediate area. So you were taking risks. A lot of guys didn't, they'd say, well, hey, you go out with a girl with a case of beer and you come back with a case of clap. So we didn't, a lot of guys didn't mess around. Because we figured, well, we got a family, and a girl's back here, and why risk it all just for one shot? Now some guys did, a lot of them did.
Did you?
Yeah, but did I?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, okay.
I can honestly say that. I didn't. Sometimes I was angry with myself, but only because we had a guy over there that sent home and told his wife, now I had a letter. He sent home and told his wife, he said, honey, I'm over here, there's a lot of women over here, and I don't think I can last the full year. So his wife wrote him a letter back, and she said, well, honey, if you go out with one of them women, don't pay over $5, because that's all I'm getting for it here. So his name was, believe it or not, his name was Swantex. We didn't call him that. We all called him Kotex. But, yeah. So.
So what was your last day of your service like?
What was the last day?
Your last day, what was it like?
Disastrous. I just had a car overhauled, and I didn't even have time to break it in. So I wasted $350 because when we got up here, after a little while, I found out that the framer was rusted. Anyway, why the last day was bad? is because you're trying to make sure you got everything. The packers come, you got to make sure every box is inventoried. You have to make sure you got a place to stay that night after you finally sign out. So it was kind of heebie-jeebie kind of stuff, you know. It wasn't too, it wasn't great. It was okay, you know. It was nice that you were now finally getting the hell out, out of the army. So when the packers and stuff, everybody got, and then I had so when we left up here, of course, you know, Perry wasn't your daddy, wasn't old to drive yet.
Not
Perry.
you. Yeah.
Perry was not old to drive yet. As we came up here, Perry being my son, I allowed him to drive some of the time, and Dink had a license. He had just gotten his license, so he was driving the other way. I had two cars, so he was driving the other one, and I was pulling a trailer. So every so often we'd kind of switch around. And anyway, Dink got Dennis, huh?
It doesn't matter.
Dennis got highly perturbed because we got speeding tickets. A cop pulled us both over because I was doing about 80 miles an hour pulling a trailer, and I told Dink to follow. So here he was a brand new driver's license and got a speeding ticket. Oh, was he hot. I mean, he was just steam coming out from his collar. He was burning up out there. But, no, the last day, you know, to go and tell all your buddies, hey, this is my last day. You know, you've seen so many others with the last day that, you just say, I'm getting short. And, hey, tomorrow's my last day. So all your buddies say, hey, hope you have a good time, and hey, hope you do good and all that stuff.
Did you maintain any friendships from there?
I did for a while, but because, like I said, in the Navy especially, when all them guys are on one ship, they're just like all brothers, you know. But being in the Army, man, I went from base to base to base. If I would have tried to keep in track with everybody that I knew from all them places, you're talking about 1,000, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So, over 1,000. And I'm talking about closer friends now. I kept in contact with a few, but that didn't take long, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody got their own life, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So, when you get out, the only thing is, when you get out of the Army, you have an awful lot of uncertainties.
Mm-hmm.
So you're kind of apprehensive about that.
And why didn't you join a veterans organization? Why didn't you join a veterans organization?
Veterans organizations, because when I got out of the Army, I wanted it all over. I'm doing it for you guys, but I couldn't sit down with some old guy and be talking about all this, unless it was, we're talking about, hey, do you remember this and this and this, see? But up here, you go and say, well, hey, I was, here and here and here. And some guys say, well, I was in the Air Force, and I was here, a lot of guys in the Air Force were in England. Mm-hmm. I was never in England. So, that kind of stuff you just don't discuss too well.
Did you receive any injuries that affect you to this day? Did you receive any injuries that still affect you? Did you get any injuries?
In the Army?
Right, that are affecting you today?
Yeah. Before I got out, I got injured. I got injured when I was in July. I was on the reaction force, which meant that when we were getting hit, like I said before, even in July you would get mortar rounds. Everybody was responsible for everybody. And you tried to keep your area secure. Anyway, this big truck, we all jumped in this big truck along with me. And of course, I was the truck commander, but I didn't want to ride in the cab. I wanted to ride in the back. Because as such, you know, the truck would stop and say, okay, 3 guys get off, and you get over there with you, and you guard that fence, and then go a little bit further. Anyway, at this one point, all of a sudden there is no bank. We're in the open, and the VC are firing right through our truck bed with AK-47s. I mean, these are supposed to be inferior weapons, and they weren't. And the bullets going right through, so anybody laying in there, if you didn't unass the truck, you might get shot right in it. So I jumped. When I jumped, I twisted and tore my leg all to hell. And couldn't hardly stand. But that's about the only other injury I got. I think was a little piece of shrapnel, but that, you know.
And your hearing. And your hearing.
Yeah, in my ears. But that was because of, we had artillery rounds, and we had a couple of artillery guns. And when they went off, my ears, you know, and then you don't, you know, just like talking in a, like you got earplugs, but you can still hear, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But,
how did your experiences affect your life?
I don't like wars, that's for damn sure. I don't like what's going on now. I think a war, in our case in the United States, if they attack a country, it should be aerial attack only. No ground forces. Not unless we're actually going to take over and occupy that country. If we're not going to occupy and rule it, then no ground forces. Mm-hmm. I'm used to discipline. There for a long time, I had a hard time taking orders instead of giving some, you know. And that caused a lot of conflict, especially working at a prison. So, for a long time, now I did get along with some prisoners, but I couldn't tolerate others. A lot of times I was in good physical shape when I first got out. Excellent shape. And at any time I was confronted with even a challenge, man, I was ready to go. I mean, some guy wanted to, you know, knock chins, I'm there, you know. Hell with it, let's get it. You know, but now that I'm old, I ain't anything, I'm killed. Badass girl kicked my ass now.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I feel sorry right now for a lot of our own veterans, a lot of our injured veterans. A lot of those are disabled. War's hell. Like we used to say, when you go away, like other soldiers over in Iraq, you know, they left their wives. They're all somebody's son. They're somebody's husbands. They're somebody's brother. They're somebody's father. You're looking at all of this, and then you got to say, hey, without a wife, life is hell. And they're over there, and war is hell. I mean, you know, there is no such thing as a front line where those guys are at. The enemy are all with them, amongst them, and that's bad news. Bad news. I often think, you know, if somebody would say, hey, would you come in the Army to serve a couple of more years, we need your assistance or something, I'd say, hey, I'm ready. You know, mm-hmm. I would give it a crack. You know.
In the Vietnam War, what was it like to know that your country didn't support you guys, really?
Sometimes I couldn't help but sympathize with some of the people, but it should have been that, hey, if we're going to fight there, it should have been, we should have had more rule, more authority, and, you know, controlled it more. But because we were trying to play a peacetime army, can't, no way. That again was the same story, just like Iraq. You know, hey, you know, we're going in there, we'll be back out. I wasn't in World War II, but a lot of the soldiers would say goodbye, dear, because at that time it was 1 year service. You were told that was it, but they'd say goodbye, dear. I'll be back in a year, and they got over there, and they didn't come back in no year. They maybe were over there 2 and 3 years. See, so that's the same with any other time. They have too many chiefs and not enough Indians. But I have to say this: the Army nowadays is so highly scientifically equipped. It's hard for old soldiers to conceive that.
Mhm.
All
right, thank you.
Okay.
They were called young and old, mostly young. They went excited and scared, mostly scared. They served for or against the cause, mostly for. They sacrificed mind, body, and soul, everything for us. We remember.
The following oral military history project is a series of documentaries in association with the Lowell area men and women who proudly served and sacrificed part of their lives to preserve the opportunities for all of us to build our businesses and raise our families under a blanket of freedom. For reservations and more information, contact the Lowell Area Historical Museum at 616-897-7688.